Well, you got a handout today, and you'll notice that it's not totally different from the one we had before. And see, probably, Cole and Laura, you probably missed that one before. Let me get you back up. These overlap a little bit. Casey won't share it.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, so 5 runs into 6, but if I kept running into the problem of never quite getting to the end of 5, not sure if I was going to spill over on the other one, not wanting to reprint the entire thing, so I kind of split the difference. And the number 6 actually comes in sort of towards like the last 2 slides that are on there in number 5. So they overlap a little bit. We'll see if that's going to matter today. Depends on how wordy I get, whether it's going to matter. So anyway, we're going through getting to know Him and the correct view of God as a tool to build and strengthen our faith and our understanding of who our God is. So just really quickly, we're going through the attributes of God again, and we've broken them down into 2 different general categories. We're going through right now the attributes of His greatness. We're partway through that one, and they're listed there. Spirituality, the fact that He's a spirit, that He's a person and has personality, that He is life, He is infinity, and He is constancy. And so we'll be working through those. And then the next ones will be His attributes of goodness, and His moral purity, His integrity, and His love. So we'll get through those. And let's see, where am I here? We've run through, I think this one already. We've been through the fact that He is spirit. And I won't belabor that one, but that He's not physical in nature. Therefore, you can be wherever you need to be as God. You are not limited to a place. And you don't have a physical body that's destructible, so there's nothing that can be destroyed there in the sense that we're used to it. And then we talked about using man's terms to describe Him so we would understand that. We looked at personality, that He has a name, and that name indicates who He is, and that the respect that's given His name helps to add some force to the fact of who He is. The name represents Him, and therefore the way that we treat His name has something to do with that. We talked about Hebrew names being really important to them, that they didn't just give names because they were popular and you looked them up on the internet, but they gave them because they had carried meaning of some type or other. And so when God uses that, and since He's writing to Hebrews in the Old Testament especially, and often even into the New Testament, though it's Greek, it's still written to the Jewish nation, so they're Jewish people. So anyway, so that carries through. Then the activities of God that show Him reacting and relating as a person with men. And then the so what if. If He is a person, then our relationship can be similar to that of another person. It's not just the force out there or something, or He is pictured as our Father. It's not a one-way street. It's that there's a give and take expected between us and God, which is kind of amazing. The idea that we can go to Him and He can come to us, and there can be a conversation, much like Adam and Eve enjoyed in the garden before the fall. The last one, I think we got right at the end. God is an end in Himself. The idea that it's not just because we value because of what he can do for us, that we want him somehow or want to have a relationship with him for what he can do for us because he's the big sugar daddy in the sky, but because he is who he is, and it's worth knowing him and having a relationship with him because he is worth having a relationship with. And so that was kind of where we ended last time. So the next thing is then that God is life. And it's kind of in a sense, it's a little bit of a no-brainer. But when you look through the Bible, it never makes an argument anywhere to say that I'm trying to prove that God is life. It's just assumed or affirmed, but it's never argued. It's just that that's what he is. And if you look at the scripture that I've got there, Jeremiah 10:10, the Lord is the only true God. He is the living God and the everlasting King, is what Jeremiah says. And he's making an argument against, well, obviously, if you think about Jeremiah, when was he writing? He was writing at the time we kind of finished up in our Old Testament study with the fall of Jerusalem. Everything's coming apart. And he's arguing to the Jewish people saying, look at who you're serving. You're serving the Baal. You're serving the God down in the valley that you're offering your children to and everything. Why are you serving these dead things, these empty idols that don't have any life? And he says, God is the only God, and he is the one that has everlasting life, that he's the living God, not the God of wood and stone. And so then the other one is John 5:26, just as the Father has life in himself, thus he has granted the Son to have life in himself, which ties into the thing we'll study later in more detail, the idea of the Trinity, that while they're separate persons, they are still God, and there you have God the Father has life in himself because he is, and God the Son has life in himself because he is. That's just who he is. And then in Thessalonians, for people everywhere, report how you welcomed us and how you turned to God from idols to serve the living and true God. Again, that concept clear over in Paul's time, where he's saying, look, you were worshiping all these various deities, these idols of wood and stone and all these kind of things, and you have now turned to the God who is alive, the one God that is there. And that was the point he was trying to make in his letter to the Thessalonians. God's life is different from every other living thing, and the main difference is that everything else gets its life from him. And you see that in the creation, where it says that wrote that out. God created the great sea and creatures and every living thing moving, every living and moving thing which the water swarmed. So there's that one thing talking about all the creatures in the seas and all that God created those things, living things. And again in Genesis, let the land produce living creatures. And so as part of his word, that created living creatures. And then the one that probably is more significant to us, the third one out of Genesis, the Lord formed man from the soil of the ground, and he breathed into his nostrils the breath, and actually in the Hebrew it's plural, the breaths of life, and man became a living being. So that all the other things God created living, but in man he breathed, it's like two forms of life, and there's a whole other study when we get to man on that. But the idea that God breathed into man this life that he has, it wasn't something that we could have without it, and all of the creation around us. So he's alive. So what? Well, his life is eternal with no beginning and no ending, which is really hard to get your brain around, because everything we know has a beginning and an ending. And God is the uncaused one, and his very nature to exist. Seems like I'm just kind of over, I feel like I'm just beating this one to death, and as I'm putting these slides together, I go, so when do I quit saying this? It's really important that we grasp that, little simple phrase that's right there in the very first part of Genesis that says, "In the beginning, God." We tend to read right over that, "In the beginning, God created." But it's really the emphasis there. A couple more handouts here. Good morning. Yeah, those you'll find that kind of overlaps with number 5. So if you're trying to make sense out of them, this one kind of begins at the end. Anyway, so God is in the beginning. God. So what does that mean? If God is always there, no beginning or no ending, one of the things that funny how man gets this idea, but put it there on one line: God does not need us. And you go, okay. Well, are you sure about that? I like to be needed, right? But He does not need us. Acts tells us that God, who made the world and everything in it, who is the Lord of heaven and earth, does not live in temples made by human hands. So He doesn't live in things that nor is He served by human hands as if He needed anything, because He Himself gives life and breath to everything, to everyone. So He is the one who gives it out. We don't need Him, and yet what He does, it changes the way we relate to Him, because it's no longer us doing something that this God needs. Now, we're going, this is a weird thinking, but you got to remember, what background did these people come from? We don't come from a background of having all the little idols lined up on the mantelpiece at home that we have to serve. Why do you serve those? When you go, have any of you been to foreign countries or anywhere where they have the other gods that they worship, there's a reason that they are there, and they make offerings to them. Often they're food offerings. And they will take either down to the temple or at their little private altar or whatever, they will offer food to the gods. Why? Because the gods need to be fed. The gods need these people to do this, to serve them, to provide these offerings. And so it's kind of, yeah, the God's powerful, but you are doing this thing because He needs to have this done. And He's saying, no, this God doesn't need you to do anything. So this changes, if He doesn't need anything, it changes the relationship. The point being, He has chosen us to serve Him. He has chosen us to do the things that He's called us to do. He could have bypassed us, and His will would have gone on and been accomplished just fine without us. And I always love the passage in Esther. If you remember reading through the story of Queen Esther, and when she found out what was going to happen, and all this terrible stuff that was going to happen to the Jews, because that evil Haman had this great plan to have this decrease and out all through the land of Persia, saying all Jewish people are going to get killed because we don't like them. And she found out about it, and she said, if I go to the king, even as queen, I could die, because if you weren't called by the king and you just showed up and you caught him on a bad hair day, you could die. Just that I don't want to hear you, I don't want to see you, you're in my way, off with their head. And just like the Queen of Hearts in the Alice in Wonderland deal, and you were gone. So it was a very real danger and real threat for her to go tiptoeing in there and go, hello. And her advice from her uncle was, this might be the reason that you are alive, and if you do not do this, it wasn't like, oh, everything bad will happen to the Jews. It said, God will use someone else and you'll miss out. That's my loose translation of that passage. Go read Esther and see if that isn't true. He says, you're going to miss out. God will use some other means. this might be the thing that He's brought you here for, to use you for, and you will miss the blessing of being used by Him. So it changes that relationship because He doesn't need us, but He chooses us. So that's a big deal when we start looking at the Christian life and what He's called us to do. So therefore we should be all the more thankful and grateful to Him for the privilege of knowing Him and being chosen to serve and work with Him. It's something to really appreciate that God has done for us. I like this quote. I'm going to have to read it down here with my eyeballs on mine. As you can tell, I am learning how to use this, and I don't always get my fonts right, do I? Kathy said they're just laughing. She thinks this is funny. I have no idea. I'm looking at it. Well, I can read it on the computer just fine. You can't read it up there. I don't know if you can read that. Your eyes are better than mine. It says, this is a quote from Millard Erickson, one of the Christian Theology, one of the books that I'm using as kind of a guide. It says, we live in a world of contingency. So much of what we know and believe is conditioned by the word if. But with God there is no need to say, God will be if. God is and will be, period. There is one sure thing, and that is that there is a God and there always will be. Now think about that a minute, and think about it. We live in contingencies, don't we? I will get up to go to work tomorrow morning if my alarm goes off, if I got the clock set right time, if my car doesn't break down, if the weather's good. I plan to go run my sprayer tomorrow if the wind doesn't blow. You know, those kinds of things. Everything we do is, well, you know, we have plans, but there's always that little if in there. And it's hard to understand that it's not a matter of God will be if I do something right. God will pay attention to me or be concerned about me or will love me if I do something right. God is who He is, and He does what He does because He is. I don't know how to get your mind around that. It's easy to stand up here and just kind of talk about it, but it's a lot tougher to implement that when you go through life because we'll keep thinking if all the time. Anyway, moving along. To infinity and beyond. Are there any Toy Story fans in here? My daughter loves these Toy Story, these creations of this. It's for those of you who don't, what is he talking about? This is Buzz Lightyear, the little spaceman toy guy in the movie, and that's his great saying is, to infinity and beyond. My daughter loves it, all of them, but it's interesting. I'm having watched these because she says we got them, they're really fun. But it's amazing what you can do with animation and cartoon and what you can teach and principles that you can stick into people's mind, positive ones, through these silly cartoon movies. I'm really impressed sometimes with, I'm not very often impressed with much of any kind from the movie industry, but these were some really interesting principles of life. But anyway, I just grabbed that because it just seemed appropriate. God is infinite. And so we have to go to infinity and beyond to try to understand Him, because it's like nothing we can get our arms around. Everything in our world is finite. How do you understand infinity? Because even things, if you go back a few hundred years, there are things that we thought were absolutely infinite. We thought the seas were so big and the wildlife in them, the fishes and everything, were so massive that they could never be depleted. Well, guess what? We were wrong. And now we're worried about what? Endangered species. We thought that if you look back at our history, they thought the forests in the United States were so massive that you could never log them off. They could never be all gone. And then all of a sudden one day they went out there and looked and parts of the country that were solid forest were nothing but a bunch of stumps and dirt running down the creek, and they said, oh my goodness, what do you do? Yeah?
It's interesting, I was watching the Answers in Genesis last night, how many, in my lifetime, and even since the 60s, things have changed on astronomy and astrology.
What they
Black
understand.
holes, and they're always finding something new, and we have to change this theory or make this theory not agree with that. And I thought,
Yeah.
that is, you know,
It's just
everything
amazing.
these
It's
days is
changing,
very
yeah, and it's not as limitless as we once thought. And you know, I mean, now we're looking at the cosmos out there in kind of the same sense that we used to look at the Earth. Because now we can go out and look down at the Earth. We can go out to the moon and look back and go, wow, it's a little dinky thing out there, you know. And so even as much as we don't understand about the Earth, we become acutely aware that things here do have limits. They're finite.
We finally come to realize that we cannot be as wasteful as we've always been.
Right. Yeah, you can't just throw stuff away. You can't be wasteful because there's limits to things. So how then do you understand a limitless God? That's tough. So getting your arms around the idea of limitless God, let's start with the idea of space. Because everything we're familiar with takes up space of some sort or other. And in our experience of things, usually, with some rare exceptions, the more space it takes up, the better it is, right? So the bigger the diamond, guys, the more space that diamond takes up, the better it is, right, ladies? Is there anybody that doesn't want the big ones, they want the little teeny ones? Because that's who I want to talk to. Oh. The bigger your car, right? The bigger your tractor, the bigger your house, the bigger your country, the bigger your Capitol building says it's better. So we have this sense that space and how much space is occupied is important. With God, however, the idea of space doesn't exist because He's not physical. So then when you do that, the question of location no longer applies because the place that it takes up, you know, like your house on top of the hill, looking down on all the peons below, or sort of idea. You know, it doesn't matter where it is, so place isn't the issue anymore. And God, being the creator of space, He was there before there was things that we conceive of as having space. He has no physical body, so He doesn't really have to be in any one place. So we have Acts 17, the God who made the world and everything in it, who is the Lord of heaven and of earth, does not live in temples made by human hands. So He doesn't need to occupy a temple. Nor is He served by human hands as if He needed it. Did I read this already? Because He Himself gives life and breath to everything and everyone. I think I've used this before. But the idea is that He's in heaven, He's the God of earth. He doesn't need to be in temples. He is. It doesn't need anything, and He doesn't need space. So then we have this weird problem in the way you look at things. For one, there's no place where He cannot be found. In other words, you can go wherever you are, He cannot be found, and there are these two words that you will hear thrown around, and I put them in there just to so it looked like I read something important. One is that He is immanent. In other words, He is every place. There is no place that He is not. But at the same time, He is transcendent, which means He is not anywhere in particular. I am not transcendent. I am somewhere. I'm always one place or another. Either I'm here or I'm Biggleton. I am someplace, and I can't. But God does not have to be in one particular place because He can be everywhere at once. So what? There is no place where you cannot access God. There's no depth in the sea, no height in space. You know, if you sign up to be one of the Mars pioneers and you go there and die in Mars, anybody reading about that? You know, you can sign up. Yeah. And you can, it's a one-way trip, they think. Anyway, so you can go to Mars, and you are not going to go so far out of the known world here that God can't find you, or He's not accessible to you. So Jeremiah says, do you people think that I am some local deity and not the transcendent God, one who doesn't have to be right here? Do you really think anyone can hide himself where I cannot see him, the Lord asked. Do you not know that I am everywhere? He's saying, hello. Again, that comes from Jeremiah. He says, you think I'm some little local God and you can just, I'm just pitching notes. And I am here. I see what you're doing. I can see what's happening. If there's no place where He's not, the point He's making with those folks there in Jeremiah is, there's no secret place where you cannot be seen. Not only can you not fall out of or somehow go to some place where you can't get in touch with Him, the flip side is, it's like, your children trying to be somewhere they shouldn't be, so they want to stay out of your sight because they don't want to get caught. And we bring that with us, don't we? You think, oh my God, didn't see that. Well, sorry, He did. He does. He sees us wherever we are, and He knows us. Psalm 139, the psalmist says, where can I go from your spirit, or where can I flee from your presence? We cannot confine Him by putting Him into a dwelling place. Now think about this. Tell me we don't do this. He is not just here in church. Have you ever done that to Him? I have to confess. Here I am, guy up front, right? I'm supposed to know all this stuff, and I'm supposed to just live it out perfectly. Huh. Have you ever found yourself, boy, Sunday morning, God is here. Next week, about Wednesday, it's like, oh, He's still back down there in that building next Sunday. I'll go down there and He'll be there. And meanwhile, where I'm living, well, maybe isn't there. Well, Ron, I have news for me. Oh, there's another bad slide with little teeny print. Oh, how that one got away? I thought I looked at these. It was early. He is also infinite in terms of time. This is a hard one. Again, we are stuck with time, aren't we? This morning, some of us were stuck with time more than others. And you all managed to be here because you are so timely. And I almost wasn't. But He is not limited, and I have trouble getting my mind around it again because everything is a sequence of time. It's either something that happened in the past or something will happen in the future, and then I'm kind of right here in the right now. And everything is this scale of time, and it's hard to understand something that's not. And I want you to think about the Great Commission in Matthew 28 and Acts 1:8 that we've just been through in our study. We're going through Acts there, but Jesus commanded His disciples, and remember what He told them? He told them to go and be a witness. Where? Nearby and to the ends of the earth, right? And then He said, you guys go out, you go all these places, and I like the old King James, lo, right? I am with you, where? Always. What's always mean? Well, all places and all times. This is what He's telling us. Actually, He says, to the end of the age. And that's interesting to me, because I'm weird about these things. The Greek word for age. The Greeks have two words for time. And I think, did I put that on the slide? Oh, boy, you can almost see it down at the bottom of that. Maybe you can read it on the paper. He is not limited by space, so anywhere on earth, by time. And He says, age, and it's a Greek word, ion. You heard eons and eons of time? There you go. It's the word ion, which means basically from here to infinity and beyond. It has no particular time thing. It means forever in the Greek mind. And then there's the other word, the one that we tend to plug in to things, because that's what we understand, is the one that in Ephesians 5:16 says, making the most of your time, or redeeming the time. And the word for time word there is kairos. And that's this moment, this present moment that we're in. And that's us. God is ion, and we are kairos. Is that confusing? I hope it's not too confusing, because that's what we live in the moment. That's just the only thing that we really understand. So, we see, and there's some scriptures for us, from everlasting to everlasting you are God. From everlasting, in other words, eternity past to eternity in the future, God is still there. Though Jesus Christ our Lord before all ages, now and forevermore. He is always there. He is always around. Expressions found in the Bible that you will see. He is the first and the last, and the Alpha and the Omega, which are the Greek alphabet. The A and the Z is the way he's described. So, what? I'm trying to work through this. If he is timeless, he still knows and understands our experience of time, and so he can relate to us. And the best illustration I have of God and us that I can get my hands around was one given in one of my study books here. It says, we are the person on the street corner watching the parade go by. And it goes by, and you see each float go by. God is the one that is in the news. They said a tall building, but this is 2015. He is on the news company drone up overhead. And when you look at the parade from that drone flying way up there in the skyscrapers, what does the drone see? The starting point over here and the ending point over there and everything in between. And you see the float that's right in front of you. And that's the difference between God and his view of us. And we'll pick that up. I thought I had one more point, but I don't. We are about out of time, so I'm going to stop right there. But I'm hoping that you can see that there are these differences matter in the way we look at God. Because it is so easy to get the idea that somehow, oh my gosh, this must have surprised him because it surprised me. This diagnosis that I had surprised God somehow. No, God understood. He saw it coming. It may even be part of it. Maybe it is his plan. We've read in Lamentations said, this disaster that you're going, I did it. I caused it. I had a reason to do it. It purifies my people. It demonstrates who I am. Whatever tool he's using in your life that he's using these things for, whether they're difficult or easy or whatever, he's doing them to demonstrate who he is and maybe using you to be a witness somewhere between here and the ends of the earth. That he has these plans and that he's not surprised and he's not shocked. That he has everything under control. And it's just hard to remember that, and I'm hoping by grinding you through all this difficult, painful stuff, that will, nothing else you grab is that he's not surprised by what happens on earth and he is still in charge. It doesn't matter how we might look at it. Let's close. Father, we thank you for our time together this morning. As we sit here and watch the parade go by, one little person, one float at a time. And we are often surprised, we are often have our lives turned on their heads by the things that passed before us that we weren't expecting. And it tends to cause us to maybe question our faith or question if you are still in charge. Help us through looking at briefly at these things to get a better handle on the fact that you are still out there in charge, that you are the beginning and the end, that you are everywhere. There's no place that we are beyond reach of you, both for good, for our blessing, for our rescue, as the psalmist often wrote, that he could cry out to you and you would be there, and it didn't matter where he was, that you would find him. In the same way, when we are attempting to hide from you because the old nature has gotten the best of us, Father, help us to be made aware. Would you point to us that you still are there, you still see us, but you have also still seen us with your grace, and that the blood of your Son, Jesus Christ, has covered that sin. And that you are standing like the Father at the door, waiting for the Son to come home. You are there waiting with open arms for us to return. Father, would you just give us confidence, give us hope, and give us excitement over the idea that the Almighty God, the Creator of the universe, the Alpha and the Omega, has chosen us to have a relationship with Him. Father, help us to desire that relationship, and help us to orient our lives towards fulfilling your call for us and enjoying your presence. We thank you in Jesus' name.